Last week we talked about what happens on Easter. Jesus rose from the dead. Today we kind of experience what that means. When you raise from the dead and you are given new life in Christ, and we celebrate that because what we've just experienced, not what you heard or what you learned, but what you just experienced, is that resurrection just doesn't erase your past, it reopens your future. It reopens your future to the possibility of God beginning to do and dream and do new things in you. And we said something last week, and I don't know if it stuck or something you remember we said, is that resurrection is still coming today, and we just witnessed that. And so I want to go back to this moment, and spoiler alert, we're going to read like a lot of text today. So if you're not a reader, well, you're going to be today. So here we go. And we want to go with something that where we left off last week is there's the resurrection, and right after the resurrection, and everybody thought all was lost, and all the disciples are scattered, and the women are at the tomb, and we see the tomb, and the tomb is open, and there's a man wearing white clothes in there, and he says, Jesus isn't here, he's risen. Go tell the disciples and Peter. Well, where is Peter? That's what we're going to look at today. Because the questions that we begin to see that are asked of Peter, which is, do you love me more than these, are the questions that Evie and Ben just began to articulate and answer. So let's go into the text right after Easter, right after the resurrection. Peter is back with a couple of the disciples, and he's up in Galilee. So Jerusalem, activity, deny. They go back up along the Jordan River, they head over to Galilee, and this is what they're doing as John records it. And we know John records it. I'll tell you, there's a little trick that you can always find that you go, I'm going out to fish, is what Simon Peter told him. Simon Peter tells them, hey, I'm going to fish. And so a couple of them said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Now fishing, at first, when we hear fishing, it sounds like something to do, but this is more than that. This is so much more than that because this is who he was before Jesus. This was his old life. This was his business that he was a part of. This was his job. And maybe this is true for you. When life gets confusing and all of a sudden you hit a wall and you're not sure what should I do or where should I go or what happens, or maybe the failure of what you have done gets so loud in your head and so loud in your mind and you're just not exactly sure what to do next because all you can see around is missed opportunities, broken everything. Most of us will go back to what was familiar. We'll go back to a time in our life where life made sense, or at least we knew what to do and how to do it, and we'll go back to that point in our life, and we'll go there. And Peter in this text is not fishing because he had free time, and it was like, well, now that Jesus thing's over, let's go fishing tomorrow. I got a free day. It's not that. He's returning to what he knows what to do, something that he can control because he just lost control of himself. He lost control of the narrative. He lost control of everything that he had given his life to. Before he met Jesus, he goes back and he went to the life that made sense to him. Because the last thing that he had gone is Jesus said, I know you're a fisherman, but I want you to fish for people. And when you and I lose clarity in our life, we often will drift towards what is familiar. When we begin to say, yes, Jesus, I'm all in, and then over time we'll drift back towards what feels familiar because oftentimes stepping into a Jesus moment or a Jesus ethic or a Jesus lifestyle doesn't feel familiar to many of us. And so over time we begin to default, not because we make a decision and go, you know what, I'm heading back. It's just, we default towards what's comfortable and what's familiar, and that's not because you're doing anything wrong, that's just human nature. And so these guys go back to what was familiar. They're out there and they're fishing all night, and they catch nothing. Sun comes up, sun rises, and there's a man on the shore as they're bringing the boat back in yelling. So let's look at the story here. John chapter 21, verse 4. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore. They didn't see that. They didn't realize it yet. But the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. So he calls out to them. Jesus calls out, friends, haven't you any fish? See, this is why I don't like fishing. It's comments like these. No, I don't. Even my dad this past week sent me a picture of a huge bass he caught on a lake in South Carolina. I was like, of course you did. Of course you did. No fish today, they answered. No. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. And suddenly it clicks. When was the last time we experienced something like this? No way. No way. And they start the process that the women started the process the day before. We saw him die. There's no way. Well, how else do you explain all these fish? I know, but there's no way. So Peter doesn't wait. Peter doesn't wait. He's there. Then, and this is how you know John wrote it, right? Then the disciple whom Jesus loved. I don't want to say my name, but we all know John's like, we all know it's me. I'm the one Jesus loved the most. So the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off. We don't want to know the details there. And he jumped into the water. He jumps into the water and heads straight to the shore. Like, I'm not waiting. It's the Lord. Now think of all the things that we know about all this, because even after everything, there's still something in Peter. Even after everything that had happened, even after all the denials, even after he said, I'll do whatever. And I think this is so important for us to realize and notice that failure may distance you from God, but it doesn't erase your desire for him. Even though all those things has happened, as soon as Peter thought, it's him. Even though the guilt, even though the shame, he still had desire. And so Peter gets to shore, and when he gets to shore, I think there's just some interesting details. When they landed, verse 9, when they landed, they saw a fire. Now, fire has been important this whole time in the story. They see a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Now, this is where we're going to do a lot of work today, and I'll do the page turn, and you'll just watch the screens. But fire has been a part of some significant moments in the life of Jesus. Notice the last time we saw fire in Peter's life, it's the moment when Peter denied Jesus. So let's go back to the moments of the crucifixion. I don't want to assume that we're all up to speed on this text, and so I want to look at this. And so this is the moment that we've talked about for the last 3 to 4 weeks about Peter denying Jesus. I just want to go back and let you know the story. You know that you've heard me say a middle school girl, all this kind of stuff. Well, this is the text for it, verse 17. There was a servant girl. This is the middle school girl. She comes up and she says, you aren't one of the man's disciples too, are you? She asked Peter, and Peter replies, No, I'm not. Details. It was cold. And the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. Let's hop down to verse 25. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there. A few verses later, Simon is still there, warming himself by the fire, and they asked him, you aren't one of his disciples too, are you? And he denied it, saying, no, I'm not. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. That's a whole other detail. We haven't gotten to that. Maybe next year. Didn't I see you with him in the garden? I know I saw you with Jesus in the garden. In fact, weren't you the one that, Van Gogh, one of the guys over there? How does this work? And Peter denied it, and at that moment, a rooster began to crow. Same setting, different moment, but we're back around the fire again. And there's something about fire, these bonfires, that have a smell. You ever been around somebody who's been in a bonfire? They come in the house, what do you say? Ugh. We've been at a bonfire? Yes. Why, yes, that is how I smell like I do smell, right? And it's in your hair, it's in your clothes, it's everywhere. And so bonfire, these little bonfires, they have a way of like staying with you. And we already know this because we know this, that our sense of smell is connected to more parts of our brain than any other one of our senses that we have. And so when we smell something, it's true, we can go back to moments that are there. And so before we go further, I think it's appropriate for us to go like, who is this Peter? Who is Peter? And why does him denying Jesus and then coming back, why is all this such a huge deal? So let's go back to Luke. We're going to hop around. It's going to be like a gospel salad this morning. We're going to hit all these points on here. So back in Luke chapter 5, verse 6, when they had done so, this is when the story of Peter even starts in the New Testament. Jesus had said, hey, throw on the side of the net. So this is connected again to the other one. Catch the side of the net. So their nets began to break. There's so many fish that are here that are coming. So they signaled their partners in the other boats, come on, help us. There's so many fish, we can't even get them in the boats. Our nets are beginning to break. The boats are sinking. There's so many fish that begin to go. And they talk about this. And Simon Peter, he's just a guy. He's just a fisherman. He's just trying to do his job. Saw this, and he fell at Jesus' knees and says this confession. Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man. That's how Peter's story starts. For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. This was an amazing day at work. Get away from me, I must be sinful. You are clearly somebody special. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, Simon, don't be afraid. And here's the moment. From now on, you will fish for people. But after the resurrection, I don't know if he forgot this or he decided he wasn't very good at it, or maybe it was just, what's the point? Jesus died. So in this moment, they pulled their boats up on the shore and they left everything. And so this is the moment that Peter quits his job, quits his lifestyle, quits what he had known before in his life to follow Jesus. And then later we go over to Matthew, and we have this other narrative that begins to start to shape in Matthew. And when we get over to Matthew chapter 16, when Jesus shows up in the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asks his disciples, this is later, this is a couple years, they've been following, they've been gathering, there's been teachings, miracles have started. And then by the time we get to Matthew chapter 16, he records that Jesus asked his disciples, hey guys, we've been together for a while and you may have heard some things and people may be spreading rumors about me, but I'm curious, who do you think that people say that I am? Who do people say, what is the word on the street? What are people saying about the Son of Man? They replied, and some say you're like John the Baptist. Others I've heard, somebody else. I heard somebody call you like, are you Elijah? Because you're kind of similar to Elijah. And still others said Jeremiah. Have you reverenced Jeremiah this morning? And so Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And then the question gets asked, but what about you? He looks at his disciples and he looks at his disciples and says, who do you think I am? Do you think I'm just a teacher? Do you think I'm a rabbi? Do you think what do you think? You're with me the most. Who do you think I am? And Simon Peter is the one who answers this question, and he says, you are the Messiah, the Son, God's Son. You are God's Son living among us. And this is where things get complicated after the resurrection, because Jesus replied to him, and he says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood. This wasn't your intellect. This wasn't, oh, you just had this great idea. But it was my Father in heaven that revealed that to you, Simon. And this is important. And I tell you that now you have been so transformed and so changed that because my Father spoke to that, your name is no longer going to be Simon. You're going to be called Peter, which means rock, and they're in Caesarea Philippi, and there's implications there. And on this rock, I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell aren't going to be able to overcome it. That's what we're building here. We take that moment, then we go even back a little bit, 2 chapters in Matthew, and we see like Peter stepping out of the boat, And Peter even walks on water. Matthew chapter 14, verse 28. Lord, if it's you, Peter looks at this. Jesus is walking on water. You've heard that. You probably have even tried that. You went to the beach one time. You're like, hey, watch this. And it didn't work, right? But you thought it was fun. And so he says, Lord, it's you. And Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Jesus, I want to do it. I want to do it. Let me try. He said, come. Then Peter got out of the boat, and Peter is walking on the water. This is why after the resurrection, it's like, bro. He's walking on the water, and he comes towards Jesus, but as soon as Peter, and you would think he would have learned, the moment he takes his eyes off of Jesus and starts to look around, what's he say? The wind and the waves, when he began to look at his circumstances, all of a sudden Peter became very human, even though he'd already heard from God and all these things. He started to look at his circumstances, and he looked at the wind, and he looked at the waves, and he began to do what you and I do, which is we became afraid. Why? Because reality creeps in, and we look at our surroundings and go, this is a problem. I'm afraid. And the moment he begins to be afraid, and his moment that his eyes go off Jesus onto his circumstances, his environment, he begins to sink. Now that makes sense. What do you do when you're sinking in water? Lord, we're going to need a mulligan on this. We're going to need a redo here. You're going to have to save me or I'm going down, which I think is funny because can't fishermen swim? I would think, but whatever. Apparently it was a really bad storm. So immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him and instructs him, hey, your faith, man, your faith is like this big. How is your faith this big? You were just walking on water. You just said you heard from God that I'm his son. You left everything to follow me, and yet you're still doubt. And Peter's not like a casual follower. He's not like a casual follower of Jesus. Peter jumped in first. I mean, Peter's the kind of guy that looks at he's like, oh, look, a pool, jumps. Then when he's in the air going, I hope there's water, right? This is the kind of guy Peter is. Peter didn't struggle with like commitment or like I'm all in. Peter struggled with like sustained clarity. Because Peter's the kind of person that like, I love Jesus, but then, oh, look over here, this is fun. Oh, look over there, let's try this. Oh, look over here, let's look at this a little bit. And then one moment, Peter gets it right. And then Jesus corrects him again. By the time we get over to Matthew chapter 16, verse 21, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem. They all knew, but none of them knew. And he tells them they're going to suffer. Jesus is going to suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, even says a who, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. So what does Peter do? Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Not on my watch, pal. No way. They got to get through me first. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. And then Jesus turns to Peter and says, get behind me, Satan. That's tough. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but you only have merely human concerns. And I think this is so true. It's been true in my life, and maybe it's been true in your life too. Have you ever had these moments like this where you're so sincere about faith, you're so sincere about trying faith, and like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And yet it seems like there's still parts of your life that are misaligned. It's like you get some parts right, and then it's like, but what do I do with that part? New book, Mark chapter 14, which is what we've been following to the resurrection this whole time. Verse 19, chapter 14, Peter declared, goes in even further, and he says, Jesus, even if everyone else on the planet falls away from you with all the things you just described about the law and the Pharisees and the chief priests and everything, if everyone falls away, I promise, I will not. Truly I tell you, Jesus says, today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows 3 times, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter emphatically looks at Jesus and says, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the others said the same. If everyone else, no matter what, I promise, this will be the last time I ever say that. This will be the last time I ever do that. This will be the last time I ever look at that. And he's making all these promises. You've made promises to God too. God, seriously, no, seriously, that'll be the last time. No, I promise. This will be my last cuss word. I promise. I promise. Swear. Oh, just kidding. That was the last one. Right? He's already answered the question once. He overestimates himself and he underestimates the cost. He overestimates his ability and he underestimates the cost of what it means to follow Jesus. And he thought, I have made this decision by myself. I did it. And I think sometimes confidence in your devotion is not the same thing as clarity in your heart. If you leaned in a little bit to Ben's story today, you found that confidence in devotion is not the same thing as your heart being transformed. He talked about his heart being transformed in Africa. You don't have to go to Africa to have your heart transformed. But there's a difference. Because then comes the moment that we read about earlier with the girl who comes, and it's public, it's painful, and Peter just didn't fail. He failed in a way that he couldn't hide from. He said, I always will, even if I have to die. And then he didn't, even on the same day. So after all that, Peter leaves and goes fishing. The morning after the resurrection, he just didn't know. He thought all was lost. He thought everything that was supposed to happen didn't. And he's out on the boat, 21:3, he's out on the boat. Because when we lose clarity in our life, we always return to what feels comfortable. So by the time we get to this moment after the resurrection, Peter is carrying still a deep love for Jesus, but also a deep regret for his failure. An uncertainty about his future, and he has this pulling towards his old life. Well, I'm like, I got to get a job now. And into this moment, this is the moment that we've been talking about for weeks. Into this moment is where the conversation takes place, where Jesus wants to know, Peter, do you love me? Not do you love me? Because the answer to do you love Jesus is the same answer that everyone in this room. I'd be willing to bet everyone in this room, if we were to go around and like ask questions, hey, do you love Jesus? I would be willing to bet. Yes, there'd probably be a little social pressure, but anyway. Yeah, I love Jesus. You love Jesus. But that's not the question. It's, do you love Jesus more than? So let's go. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, I'm going to ask you again. Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, then take care of my sheep. Third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than what, Jesus? More than fish? More than fishing? More than boats? More than my old life? More than the other disciples? Do you love me more than what? Do you love me more than a version of yourself that you can't control? These, what is these? These is anything in your life that competes for first place in your life. That's what these are. And Jesus did not ask, and I love how this is so great, and we looked at this a little bit last week. Jesus doesn't say, why did you fail? Why did you screw up? What were you thinking? He doesn't use guilt, because last week we said guilt is such a messy thing that you think, people think guilt is like you'll feel so guilty that you'll want to change. Not how change works. Jesus leaves with clarity, not pressure, just clarity. So he asks him 3 times, not to shame him, to restore him. Every denial that Peter made gets a reactive and equal response from Jesus. Peter failed 3 times. Jesus asked him for clarity 3 times. And Jesus isn't trying to replay your failure. He just wants to redefine your future. And each time, feed my sheep, take care of my sheep, follow me, because at some point, this question to Peter isn't Peter's question anymore. It's ours. It's yours and mine, individually, together. Do we love Jesus more than these? So what are our these? Is it your plans? Is it your comfort? Is it your control? Is it your reputation or your perceived reputation? Is it your habits? Is it your old vocabulary that just keeps creeping? Is it your version of how life should go or how life should have gone or what should have happened? And maybe the most honest answer is, we all know the right answer. We all want to say, yes, Jesus, we love you. But that's not the answer Jesus is looking for. He wants honesty. Because every time, of course, Jesus, you know I love you more than these. But after his failure, Peter answers and says, Lord, I think you know now. Not I'm trying to convince you. Jesus didn't ask Peter this question when Peter was at his best. When we're at our best and life's clicking and life's going on and we're like, oh man, this is great. And you look at your bank account and you're like, oh my gosh, there's an extra $20, right? And you're like, how'd this happen? Jesus never, that's not when we give our honest answers. Our honest answers come when we're at our worst. And Peter hit bottom. And that's when Peter was finally able to get honest. Because when we get clear about what we love the most, it begins to shape everything else. It shapes your decisions, it shapes your priorities, it shapes your direction of your life. And Jesus didn't even ask Peter for everything all at once. He just asked him, would you come with me and fish for people? And by the end of this story, after the Easter resurrection, Jesus comes back and he looks at Peter and he says, do you love me more than the these in your life? Do you love me more than the things that keep creeping up in your life that you think you've buttoned up and pinned down? And so we want to pray again this week. Jesus, if you're not finished with Peter, if you didn't quit on Peter, then maybe you won't quit on me. And if you're not going to quit on Peter, and if you're not going to quit on me, then Lord, help me not to quit on you. And this morning, we want to pray that prayer as sincerely as we can. We've already admitted, we already know the answer. Do you love Jesus more than these? Yes, Lord, you know. We got up on a Sunday morning and drove. We came here. You know we love you. I know. But you love me more than these. And this morning, we want to spend some time with that, and we're going to sing a song together, and you may want to get up, and you may want to do what we offer here each and every week. You may want to go to a cross, and you may want to write your prayer. Maybe you just need to get your these out. That thing that keeps creeping up, that thing that you go, no, Jesus, no, seriously, last time I won't deny you again by my attitude, by my actions, by my words, by the things that I say, by the people I'm around. Maybe it's that. And you may want to write that on the cross and pin it to the cross. That'd be great. Maybe there's other things in your life that you just need, God, I just need help, because you're drowning and you're like, Lord, help me. Maybe that's the part of Peter's story you need right now today. Maybe today you just need to light a candle because you're just like, God, please. Or maybe you want to take communion and bring it back to your seat and peel the cellophane off and take the bread and take the cup and remember that Christ died for you. Whatever it is that's the most important thing you need to go to reorient your life and to reprioritize your life, take this moment to do that right now. Let me pray with you and then the band's going to play. Father, this morning, what a life. from following the Messiah to experiencing the miracles firsthand, to hearing the teachings firsthand, to being a participant at the Last Supper, to watching the crucifixion take place, to fishing again and seeing a miraculous catch of fish, then being by the fire one more time. To bring us here in Bourbonnais, Illinois this morning to a place where we answer the exact same question: do we love Jesus more than these? And Lord, this morning we want to answer that question, not with the right answer, but with an honest answer. So God, would you help us not to just give the correct answer, but to give an honest answer and to figure out why, if Jesus isn't the first and best. Would you provide clarity to our heart? And for that, we'll be glad and grateful. We love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray.